Welcome back. You're watching Morning Express, and on this part of the show today we talk about cybercrime. Now, two students of Jomo Kenyatta University of Agriculture and Technology were early this week charged at Milimani Law Courts with conspiracy to defraud NCBA Bank of over 190 million shillings. Anthony Mwangi and Anne Wamboi were accused of committing the offence on or before October the 20th, 2020. Jointly with others not before court in the second count, they were charged with stealing against the law. The court heard that on dates between October 20th and 22nd, 2020 at NCBA Bank PLC head office in Upper Hill, jointly with others not before court, stole over 25 million shillings, the property of said bank.
And have cooperated so far.
Further to the grounds that have been laid before you by my colleague, it is also important to note that the particular crime which the accused are allegedly being accused of happened on an IT platform, and not only did the bank that there was a system glitch, and when the bank failed to respond, he took it upon himself to write an SMS and was in communication with the bank.
Bond of bail is a constitutional right which can only be limited where proof is demonstrated before the court. The main purpose of bond of bail is to ensure that the accused persons turn up to trial. In considering all the circumstances in this case, each accused person may be released on a bond of 2 million with a civil surety or an alternative cash bail of 500,000 in one contact person each. The prosecution will provide statements and the documents mentioned virtually before court number 12 on the 10th of November for pre-trial and for fixed number hearing date. The links are available in Kenya Law Report.
And this morning we're asking you on Twitter whether you think the existing legal regime, rather the existing laws regarding cybercrime are effective in dealing with it. Do you think the legal regime is effective in dealing with cybercrime in the country? I'm at Trix Ingado. The hashtag to use is KTN Morning Express. Tell us what you think. Do you even know what cybercrime is? To demystify this problem that Kenya is increasingly facing, we have ProTech Director Job Olo, who's joining us just to help us understand what this is all about and why you and I should be worried. Welcome to the show, Job. Mr. Lo, can you hear me?
Thank you very much for...
Wonderful.
Yes, I can hear you.
Yes. So let's start off with the basics. In case someone's watching at home and they have no idea what cybercrime is, could you define for us what constitutes cybercrime?
Cybercrime basically is a criminal, it's basically crime, the traditional crime moving into the digital space. So what has happened in recent times is you'll find a lot of things have happened, and especially now with the COVID situation, yes. We are in the digital era, and everything is now happening online, and cybercrime for me is just criminals now transferring their criminal intent into the cyberspace.
Yes, and using tech for the wrong reasons, obviously to steal, for example, the case that we have just highlighted at the beginning of the discussion. Now, in your view, or perhaps being an expert in such matters, could you break it down for us and explain to us what are the various types of cybercrime activities?
Yeah, so there's various types of cybercrime activities, like you said. There's obviously there's insiders stealing information,
yes.
And then you'll have the hacker community, which mainly operates in the dark web, and they would be selling this information to other people within that particular ecosystem, and the other type of crime would be, actually people would be stealing with criminal intent or nefarious reasons from outside of the organization. So you'll have, for example, even insiders colluding with people from the outside to try and exfiltrate data from within an ecosystem.
Now, the various forms, let's just pick them, break them down, and perhaps you could define them for us and help the viewers understand what to look out for when they're trying to note something that is fishy or, you know, potentially dangerous to them as they engage in the activities on the cyberspace. Now, let's start off with phishing. What is phishing?
So phishing, and I'll just be cheeky to say it has a PH. It's not your traditional phishing.
Yes.
So, this would be somebody actually sending out an email with a malicious link.
Okay.
And basically, if then one of your users or employees ends up clicking on this link, they would end up being redirected to a website that is being now used by the hacker community to try and exfiltrate the information.
Okay. Now, there's the misuse of personal data, let's call it, basically identity theft. How does this one happen?
So identity theft is basically, this happens when you have cyber criminals accessing your personal information, the personally identifiable information, without your knowledge, and then using it for nefarious reasons. And I'll give you an example. Like right now, we have a Huduma number, which is being implemented, and they say it's going to be implemented soon. We, as Kenyans, shared a lot of our information with the government, and if should this land in the wrong hands, then somebody can actually use this information for malicious reasons.
And malicious reasons could be access to your bank account. What sort of things, what sort of dangers lie behind identity theft?
So there's a lot of dangers that lie in that sphere, and for me, the biggest danger actually is what you just mentioned. If somebody has access to your bank account details, what this means is they can actually be able to access your account and be able to transfer funds without your knowledge. And this has happened in recent times. I know you publicize this quite highly.
Yes.
Where there was a KRA hack by a gentleman, and I will not go into the details, but long story short is they lost about 4 billion. And this is a huge number. If any organization, whether private or government, was to lose such amounts of money. So if this information falls into the wrong hands, then this is a kind of thing that you would expect.
Absolutely. And when you talk about that, you've introduced the element of hacking. How dangerous is it? Could you explain to us, and citing certain examples that we have witnessed in Kenya lately, to just show the people what is happening and, of course, why this is actually quite something that is with us. It's not some outside element that other foreign countries should be worrying about.
Okay, so I mentioned about the KRA hack.
Yes.
Example, and there are various other examples. You just mentioned the NCBA hack, and I cannot go into the details of all of the hacks because we have NDAs with some of these organizations. We actually work a lot with law enforcement and government and such institutions, and basically what happens is there's a lot of this is happening locally here, but the challenge that we've been having is the legislation does not require disclosure.
Yes.
So you'll find most organizations just keep it to themselves.
And
but I know for the banking institutions or the finance institution, there's cyber security guidelines that were released by the CBK, which now mandates them to disclose, and that is probably one of the reasons why NCBA has gone public with this particular one.
Yeah, but this silence, could you explain why organizations would be very quiet about it? Is it because it would dissuade their clients or cost them business? Why is it very important? Because the more silent we are about this situation, the more it takes root, because not a lot of awareness is raised.
Yeah, so most organizations are actually suffering in silence. But one of the things that I would say helps is if we can be able to go public with this information and share the knowledge amongst ourselves, not just as a cyber community, but every other industry that is involved, then the criminals would know that, everybody's watching. But right now you'll find that if an organization is hacked, and I'll give you an example, there's what we call ransomware.
Yes.
Many organizations have suffered this form of attack. But then if they are asked to pay the ransom, they will end up paying without necessarily, engaging the law enforcement. So then what this means is then the hacker community feels that this, they're able to meet whatever the end game was, and they continue with their malicious intent.
Yeah. Now, speaking of malicious intent, how then can a business avoid getting to the extent of being swindled by these elements? But what sort of protection can they set up for themselves? I believe that's where you come in as ProTech.
Yeah, correct. So there's various things that organizations can be able to do. I've always been a very strong champion for what I would call defense in depth of I think it's, let's just call it that, defense in depth. And basically what it means is you want to be able to protect your crown jewels the most. And the crown jewels are, which is what the hacker community is really interested in, is your data. So we start with the data, then we look at the applications, then we look at the network, then we look at the gateway, and the list is almost endless. But then you mentioned a very important aspect of it all. And this would be the user awareness bit. Yeah, so most organizations would need to have controls in all of these various levels to be able to secure the environment.
Now, far from that, could you explain to us why we are basically sitting ducks? I was speaking to someone who says that even at the government level, we are basically naked when it comes to cybersecurity. Do you think we could do better in ensuring that we are more protected from media houses to government agencies? What would you love to see to feel that we are secure?
It's an interesting question. Are we sitting ducks? Yes, we are. Why? Because cybersecurity is an arms race. I have been at it for 15 years now, and in IT, probably 20 years combined. And what I have seen is many organizations, when we were starting off with cybersecurity those many years ago, many organizations would assume that when they had an antivirus and a firewall, they were secure. Remember, I mentioned that there are various different levels within the organization that needs to be protected. So cybersecurity is an arms race. Why? Because the hacker community is not sleeping. We have a saying that safe never sleeps.
Yes.
So for us as cybersecurity professionals, one of the things that we must do is we must not be caught off guard. We must not be caught sleeping.
Yes. Now, speaking...
And it needs to be a 24/7 engagement.
Yeah. And remember, you can't be a part of this conversation by answering this question. Do you think the existing legal regime is effective in dealing with cybercrime in the country? Do you think the existing legal regime is effective in dealing with cybercrime in the country? Would like to know what you think. Tag us at KTN Morning Express. What has been your experience as far as this element is concerned? And of course, I shall be sampling those views. And far from that, remember that this element goes farther than just the more technical, the hacking and the invading of personal identity and data. It also goes down to spreading hate and inciting terrorism. We have seen a lot of cyberspace grooming of people who enact terrorist attacks in countries that are so far from the origin of whatever influence was at play. Far from that, we have the distribution of child pornography. This is also categorized as cybercrime. Far from that, grooming and making sexual advances to minors is also considered cybercrime. So remember, the actions that you are going into online are not protected at all. You need to be very careful and, of course, protect the more vulnerable people, because some of these kids have access to cyberspace technology and the internet, and therefore there are predators who can actually go out out of their way to do these crimes onto unsuspecting minors. Now, as we close the conversation, Mr. Olo, I'll pose this question back to you. What do you think of the Cyber Crimes Act in Kenya? Is it sufficient? Is it good? And could it be tweaked to make things more, appropriate to the times?
So it's one step in the right direction. I know there's a Data Protection Act. I was actually quite encouraged the other day when we saw the president nominate a candidate for the Data Commissioner's position. And I know this has largely been driven by the Huduma number requirements, but it's a good step in the right direction because this commissioner will not be dealing just with Huduma number.
Yes.
It's a substantive position to be able to help with the data security of all of our citizens. So it's not, I wouldn't say we are there yet. It's a journey that we have begun. And I think and I feel strongly that we are in the right direction.
Absolutely. Thank you very much. Jacob Olo is the Director of Protect and an expert in cyber crime and matters relating to cyberspace. Now, we are going to take a break, but remember, on the other side, we are getting you informed on what's happening across the borders in Tanzania. They went to the polls yesterday, and of course, there has been so many issues that have been raised both by local and international observers, the claims of abuse, rather violence, and far from that, the stifling of their democratic space. We shall dig deeper into that and see whether or not these are justified claims and what this bodes for democracy in our neighboring Tanzania. So let's take a short break. When we come back, Michael Gitonga shall be taking us through that particular discussion.
This is